It looks like I'm doing a news segment today. Hi everybody, this is Shush. Welcome to the new studio, and today we're going to talk about the 2022 Oscars. As a disclaimer, I know the Oscars are kind of a cringy popularity contest. A lot of people don't take them very seriously and understandably don't want to watch celebrities just talking about how amazing they are the whole time. These sentiments are completely valid, but I think there are some decent selections this year. I was able to see a good amount of the films nominated, so I thought it might be fun to go over the nominees and who I think will win and should win. I'll be giving you my general feelings on the different films being nominated, so this video will sort of act as like a catch-up video for some films that I haven't already talked about on the channel. I'll be scoring some of them as I go. I'll be omitting any categories with 2 or more films in them that I haven't seen. Please excuse me if I mispronounce the names of the nominees. I'm gonna screw some of these up. It's gonna happen. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first category I'm gonna cover is Best Film Editing. The nominations include Hank Corwin for Don't Look Up, Joe Walker for Dune, Pamela Martin for King Richard, Peter Skibaris for The Power of the Dog, and Myron Kirstein and Andrew Weisblom for Tick, Tick, Boom. So for this category, I think Joe Walker will win for Dune, and I think he should win. He and Denis Villeneuve had the impossible task of condensing a massive story, or one half of a massive story, into a digestible 2.5-hour film. Tick, Tick, Boom is a decent film with some good editing. It was better than I thought it would be. Same thing goes for King Richard, which is competently made. My issue with both King Richard and Tick, Tick, Boom is that I think they're a little too long. Both films get to a point where they're not really telling you anything new. They're kind of just doing the same thing over and over again. Don't Look Up should have not been nominated for this category, along with a slew of other categories. Adam McKay's films have a very unique editing style. I think that editing style worked really well for The Big Short, a great Adam McKay film. But with Don't Look Up and Adam McKay's previous film, Vice, more often than not, the jittery cuts, freeze frames, chaotic cross-cutting, and other editing gimmicks have just been kind of annoying. The Power of the Dog is a great film that I think is well edited, but I would still give it to Joe Walker for Dune because of the sheer nature of editing a film like that. The Power of the Dog is a pretty small and straightforward drama with fewer characters that probably didn't have nearly as much footage to sift through as Dune. That doesn't necessarily make Dune a better film. I just think editing something like Dune is far more difficult and easier to appreciate than a film like The Power of the Dog. Next up, we have Best Original Screenplay, which includes Belfast, written by Kenneth Branagh, Don't Look Up, written by Adam McKay and David Sirota, King Richard, written by Zach Balan, Licorice Pizza, written by Paul Thomas Anderson, and The Worst Person in the World, written by Eskil Vogt and Joachim Trier, or something. I don't have a good idea of who's gonna win Original Screenplay. If I had to pick one, it would probably be Belfast, who has 7 nominations, which is more than any of the other films in this category. Can someone please explain to me what is so good about Belfast? I still don't really know what the point of the story was. I didn't really care about anything that was going on. It was just so boring. I just think it's a very middle-of-the-road film. I'd probably give Belfast like a 2 out of 5. Don't Look Up has a great concept, and there are parts of the story that I really enjoyed, but it's not a great satire in my opinion, which largely has to do with the fact that it's a little too scattershot in its approach to its subject matter, it's inconsistently funny, and it just hits you over the head with its message constantly. I understand that Adam McKay's approach is meant to be abrasive and pretty aggressive, but I don't think a little bit of subtlety would hurt. King Richard did surprise me. I think it's fairly well written, but it is a pretty conventional script, and as I said earlier, I definitely feel like parts of its nearly 2.5-hour runtime could have been cut. Licorice Pizza is very well written for the most part, although I still don't understand why Paul Thomas Anderson had to make Gary 15, who's sort of dating a 25-year-old played by Alana Haim in the film. I went into detail about this relationship between the main characters in the review for Licorice Pizza, which you can find in the description below. You should check that out if you want to get my full nuanced opinion on that relationship. It would take too much time to explain here. The film I personally think should win, a film I really enjoyed watching, is The Worst Person in the World. The best part about it is its script, which tells the story of a young woman entering adulthood who has commitment issues. This film was kind of hard to pin down genre-wise. It felt mostly like a film for people who hate romantic comedies that's largely focused on the uncertainty of life. I found the main character to be very relatable, which is probably part of the reason why I felt attacked by this film. Because of her flakiness, she ends up making a lot of callous decisions that seem wrong and selfish, but you also kind of understand that this character wants to evolve and not feel like she's just settling for one role or one thing or being a spectator of her own life, as she says. It's definitely a strange film that isn't for everyone, but if you want an honest and funny story about the complexities of being a young adult in the 21st century, navigating romance and life. I think you should see it. While I'm here, I'm gonna go ahead and give this film a 4 out of 5 since I'm not gonna do a formal review for it, so definitely check it out if you get the chance. Next up, we have Best Adapted Screenplay, which includes Cien Hideur for Coda, Ryusuke Hamaguchi and Takamasa Oe for Drive My Car, John Spates, Denis Villeneuve, and Eric Roth for Dune, Maggie Gyllenhaal for The Lost Daughter, and Jane Campion for The Power of the Dog. I haven't seen The Lost Daughter, so I can't comment on how good or not good the writing was for that film. I did see Coda, which was fine, I guess. I didn't like Coda that much for the first 30 to 40 minutes of its runtime, and then it sort of won me over later on when it stopped trying to be funny and got more serious. There were definitely parts of Coda that felt very genuine and authentic, but a lot of that is weighed down by how formulaic, contrived, and corny the writing can be. Apple TV. We already have enough streaming services as it is, and I refuse to subscribe to a company whose specialty is not making content. It's just making slick, overpriced phones and computers. We already have so many competitors, and Apple thinks,
yeah, let's do it, guys. Let's jump into content.
There is no reason for Apple to get into content. Like, they weren't making content before. Like, at least with Paramount Plus, they have content that they own. What the f did Apple own originally? Every time I see a trailer for a new Apple TV product, it just looks so phony. Like, it's trying so hard to be like this premium content. I'm sorry that this has nothing to do with the Oscars. I'm so sick and tired of seeing these Apple TV trailers and my friends being like,
hey Josh, you should really subscribe.
Go!
I feel like an old man just like yelling right now. Dune has a solid script, but I do think it could have done a better job of trying to make the ending feel a little more grand and not so abrupt. I guess that's not necessarily a script issue. It could also be an editing issue, but I think a better script could have helped tie up the ending a little better. The two frontrunners for this award, in my opinion, is Drive My Car and The Power of the Dog, which are both incredibly well written. I think more than likely The Power of the Dog will win because the story deals with some very present issues like toxic masculinity and sexuality. Issues that Sam Elliott took personally, apparently.
Did you see Power of the Dog? Did you watch that movie?
Yeah, you want to talk about that piece of shit?
Oh no, you didn't like that one?
No.
Maybe Sam Elliott has some demons that he hasn't reconciled, just like Benedict Cumberbatch's character in the film. I don't know. I love Drive My Car. I think its screenplay is pretty great, with so many moments in the film being spellbinding. There are scenes with characters just talking for 10 to 15 minutes, just shot reverse shot, and I could not look away. It's really hard for me to say which film should win, so I'm just gonna say both The Power of the Dog and Drive My Car should win. There you go. Next up, we have Best Sound. This includes the names to a lot of people, so I'm just gonna say the films for the sake of time. This list includes Belfast, Dune, No Time to Die, The Power of the Dog, and West Side Story. Dune is going to win and should win. Everything about the film technically is amazing from top to bottom, including the sound design and mixing. No Time to Die and West Side Story also had some great sound design. I wouldn't be mad if they won, but all of these films here just can't stand up to Dune. Next up, we have production design and set decoration, which includes Patrice Vermette and Susanna Suppose for Dune, Tamara Deverell and Shane Viao for Nightmare Alley, Grant Major and Amber Richards for The Power of the Dog, Stefan DeChant and Nancy Haig for The Tragedy of Macbeth, and Adam Stockhausen and Rena D'Angelo for West Side Story. I think all of these are great choices, and I wouldn't be mad if anybody here won. I think out of everyone though, Patrice Vermette and Susanna Suppose for Dune will win and probably should win. I think they did a great job of making the world of Dune look both ancient and futuristic. A lot of the film is shot with these practical sets, even though sci-fi films tend to use a lot of green screen. I can't even imagine how much work it was to build all of these sets, which are used often, and they really helped make the experience just so immersive. West Side Story also excels in this category with a variety of beautiful set pieces, whether it's the colorful street performances or the gritty look of the rumble scene. The Tragedy of Macbeth is admittedly not my type of film. I fell asleep for some of it, but the set decoration and production design did look nice when I was awake. I liked how cold and ominous everything about it was. I just wish I could understand what the f everybody was saying. The Power of the Dog is very competent in this category, but it is a lot smaller in scale compared to the rest of these films, which doesn't make it worse than the rest or anything like that. There's just not as much going on. Nightmare Alley is another strong competitor, which is not surprising. Guillermo del Toro always hires the best talent for his films. The production design and set deck is no exception here. It looks excellent from beginning to end. I watched a black and white screening for Nightmare Alley and it was just so gorgeous. It reminded me of a lot of the older noir films back in the day from the 1940s and 1950s. It just looks so good. Even with all these other great films here, I still do think Dune has a slight edge. It was just so creative with how it used its sets. It never looked corny or over-exaggerated, which is difficult to pull off when working with a sci-fi world as strange and bizarre as Dune. Next up, we have one of my favorite categories, which is Best Cinematography. This list includes Greg Fraser for Dune, Dan Laustin for Nightmare Alley, Ari Wegner for The Power of the Dog, Bruno Delbonnel for The Tragedy of Macbeth, and Janis Kaminski for West Side Story. This is another tough category with a lot of great nominees. I don't have a great idea of who's going to win, but something tells me it's going to be Ari Wegner, who's only the second woman to be nominated as Best Cinematographer. She definitely deserves the award if she gets it. There are so many beautiful landscape shots in The Power of the Dog, and a lot of great composition that heightens the emotion for different scenes. Nightmare Alley is also beautiful. It's pretty easy to see why Guillermo del Toro has worked with Dan Laustin so many times. West Side Story also has a lot of excellent cinematography that often complements its beautiful set pieces. There's a number of shots that really stand out to me, including the opening shot and the entire school dance sequence, which is just wow. Greg Fraser's work on Dune was pretty excellent. He was a great match for the material, and all the cinematography works really well with all the other elements of the film. He had to think a lot about visual effects when doing a lot of his shots, more so than a lot of these other films. So in that respect, I think that, he might get special consideration. It's hard for me to even say who should win. If I had to pick one that's not Ari Wegner, it would probably be Bruno Delbonnel. I didn't even like the film he's nominated for, but fuck does it look amazing. Everything is so stark and so moody. It almost seems like the shots from The Tragedy of Macbeth were like taken out of like a comic book. Like everything is just so moody. Fun fact, Bruno Delbonnel was also the DP for The Woman in the Window, which also came out in 2021 and has been nominated for a few Razzie Awards. It's because of his great work in that film that it's not a complete dumpster fire in my opinion. Some people think it is, but it looks so good that it's hard for me to say that it's trash, even though the story is garbage. Next up, we have Best Supporting Actress, which includes Jessie Buckley in The Lost Daughter, Ariana DeBose in West Side Story, Judi Dench in Belfast, Kirsten Dunst in The Power of the Dog, and Anjanu Ellis for King Richard. I can't speak to Jessie Buckley's performance since I haven't seen The Lost Daughter, as I've already told you, but everybody else here is good. I think more than likely Ariana DeBose will win, and she probably should win. She was pretty great in West Side Story. She has a background in theater, which is not surprising. Not only does she act the part well, but she's also an incredible dancer and performer. As a fun fact, if she ends up getting this award, she'll actually be the second person to win the same Oscar for the same role, the other being Rita Moreno in the 1961 West Side Story film. Kirsten Dunst was pretty great in The Power of the Dog, who's this very loving but timid woman with drinking issues. I've never seen her in a role like that. Would not be surprised if she ended up winning. As for Anjanu Ellis and Judi Dench, I did like them in their roles, but I don't think they were quite as good as Ariana DeBose and Kirsten Dunst in their respective roles. Next up, we have Best Supporting Actor, which includes Ciarán Hinds for Belfast, Troy Kotsur for Coda, Jesse Plemons for The Power of the Dog, Cody Smith-McPhee for The Power of the Dog, and J.K. Simmons for Being the Ricardos. So everybody in this category was very good. My big issue is that it doesn't include Mike Feist from West Side Story, who delivered one of the best performances I saw in 2021, period. I honestly thought he was a lock to win this award. He's just so intimidating and charismatic as Riff. But I'm gonna say Troy Kotsur will win and probably should win. He's pretty great in Coda and stands out a lot more than the other performances here. I like Ciarán Hinds in Belfast. Some speculate that he may take the award this year. Cody Smith-McPhee and Jesse Plemons were both great in The Power of the Dog. I would not be surprised if either of them ended up taking the award. Part of me really wants Jesse Plemons to win, who's just a great actor. He was also in Breaking Bad, which, that's one of my favorite shows, so deep down I'm like kind of rooting for him. I haven't seen Being the Ricardos, so I can't speak to J.K. Simmons' performance, but he's already won an Oscar, so he probably doesn't need one. Moving on, we have Actress in a Leading Role, which includes Jessica Chastain for The Eyes of Tammy Faye, Olivia Colman for The Lost Daughter, Penelope Cruz for Parallel Mothers, Nicole Kidman for Being the Ricardos, and Kristen Stewart for Spencer. I can't speak to this category, unfortunately, as I have not seen enough of these films. The only one I have seen here is The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which is honestly a bad movie, but Jessica Chastain is really good in it. Like, she's so good, I'm willing to bet money that she'll win, even though I haven't seen any of these other films. So go ahead and place your bets, people. I'm ready to go. Next up, we have Best Actor in a Leading Role, which includes Javier Bardem for Being the Ricardos, Benedict Cucumbers for The Power of the Dog, Andrew Garfield for Tick, Tick, Boom, Will Smith for King Richard, and Denzel Washington for The Tragedy of Macbeth. Like I've already said, I haven't seen Being the Ricardos, so I can't say whether or not Javier Bardem was good, but he's always good, so I'm sure it's no different in this film. Not sure if it's going to be enough to get him an award, though. Denzel Washington was very good during the parts of The Tragedy of Macbeth that I was actually awake for, but I didn't feel like he would win an Oscar for it. The acting in The Tragedy of Macbeth is amazing across the board, but I don't know, I just feel like his inclusion here kind of feels like a throw-in. I would have liked to have seen Cooper Hoffman from Licorice Pizza get a nomination, who was really great. Andrew Garfield delivered a captivating performance in Tick, Tick, Boom. I think he's the best thing about that film, but I don't think his performance was as good as some of the others here. I definitely think he will win one at some point. He's very consistent and is getting a lot of work right now, so I could easily see Benedict Cumberbatch winning the award, who delivered a fierce performance in The Power of the Dog as this mean and toxic rancher. But I think Will Smith is probably going to take it, and he probably should. I would not be mad if he won, because he was actually, to my surprise, pretty great in King Richard. Will Smith has been in a lot of terrible films and delivered a lot of terrible performances in those films lately, like Suicide Squad and Bright, just two awful, awful films.
So that's it? What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
I honestly felt like his career was kind of not looking great for a second there, but he really did a great job in King Richard. It was one of the few performances I've seen from him recently where it feels like he's playing a different character and not just playing himself. It's very clear from watching Will Smith's performance that he was very passionate about getting this character right. Next up, we have Best Director, which includes Kenneth Branagh for Belfast, Ryosuke Hamaguchi for Drive My Car, Paul Thomas Anderson for Licorice Pizza, Jane Campion for The Power of the Dog, and Steven Spielberg for West Side Story. I think this is a pretty good list outside of Kenneth Branagh for Belfast, who I think should have been replaced with Denis Villeneuve, who, from what I've seen, still has not made a bad film yet. I don't think Paul Thomas Anderson is going to win. I'd be happy if he did, because he's never won Best Picture or Best Directing ever for any of his films somehow. Steven Spielberg did an amazing job with West Side Story against all odds. Like, no one thought his remake was going to be good, and he kind of proved everyone wrong, like, profoundly. But because he's won so many times, I feel like that could hurt his chances of winning. I also don't think West Side Story is the best directed film amongst this group. That leaves Ryosuke Hamaguchi for Drive My Car and Jane Campion for The Power of the Dog. Out of these two, I think Jane Campion will win. If she does, this will be the second year in a row that a woman has won Best Director, which is pretty cool. But I do think Ryosuke Hamaguchi should win. He took a very reserved and low-key approach to Drive My Car, and yet it is still such an impactful and mesmerizing film. There's a lot of subtle choices in the film that really helps everything come together so well, and I think that can be credited to his great direction. And finally, we have Best Picture, which includes Belfast, Coda, Don't Look Up, Drive My Car, Dune, King Richard, Licorice Pizza, Nightmare Alley, The Power of the Dog, and West Side Story. So first things first, Belfast, Coda, and Don't Look Up should not be here. These films aren't terrible necessarily, but they're not worthy of being nominated for Best Picture. I feel like sometimes the Academy will just get lazy with their selections and just nominate the works of the same directors over and over again, even if what they're being nominated for isn't very good. I feel this way about Adam McKay, whose past two films have been nominated for Best Picture, including Vice, which is not a good film. A lot of people did like Don't Look Up, and I think I can see why. It has a straightforward and relevant political message that I think most people would probably agree with. It has a super talented cast and has some of that trademark Adam McKay humor, which has been successful throughout the years. But regardless of how much you like Don't Look Up, I think all of us can agree that it's not exactly this intellectual experience and didn't exactly make the best satire. Coda has some good moments, but it gives me serious TV movie vibes with how it's a crowd pleaser about family. Coda to me just feels like a slightly more adult Disney Channel movie, which is something I'm just not interested in. As I've said already, I don't understand why people like Belfast. Please explain to me, please. It's not good. I think it has the shortest runtime amongst the rest of the films here at 1.5 hours, and yet it felt like it was the longest film I watched. The next few films here that are good but won't win include Licorice Pizza, King Richard, Nightmare Alley, and Dune. I liked Licorice Pizza a lot despite some of its story choices. What's really great about it is how it's able to genuinely evoke a true sense of nostalgia for a time period. It's really refreshing to see a film like Licorice Pizza when there are so many other films today that just try to cynically exploit nostalgia without any care or authenticity. Space Jam 2. Licorice Pizza represents the 70s in Southern California through the peculiar lens of Paul Thomas Anderson, and even though the story can feel kind of random, it still comes together pretty well, just not enough to win Best Picture. I thought King Richard would quickly drift into sappy family movie territory like Coda did, but while it is conventional, it never felt overly sentimental or corny. I'd probably give it like a high 3 out of 5. The tone is consistent, it's fairly well directed, the performances are good outside of some of the younger actors. Will Smith especially is good. It's a decent film, but it is a little long and far away from some of the better competition in this category. I enjoyed Nightmare Alley, especially on a technical level. It's incredibly well crafted like everything else Guillermo del Toro does. My big problem with Nightmare Alley is that the first half felt kind of slow, and some characters don't get nearly enough development. There's a romance in the film between Bradley Cooper and Rooney Mara that's really undercooked and not earned. I wouldn't mind that as much if their relationship wasn't so important to the story, but it kind of is. I'd probably give the film a 3.5 out of 5 overall. I think it can definitely win some of the other categories it's been nominated for, but not Best Picture. Dune is a massive achievement when you consider how difficult it is to adapt a story as dense and detailed as Dune, but as much as I respect the effort from Denis Villeneuve and the rest of his team, I just don't think it's good enough to compete with the next 3 nominees being West Side Story, The Power of the Dog, and Drive My Car, which in my opinion are the most complete films here. I cannot express how much I like the new West Side Story. I've thought about it more and more, and I can now say confidently that the new West Side Story film is better than the old one. I wasn't sure about that initially when I first reviewed the new West Side Story, but it really is a great remake for today and sets the standard for what remakes can be. As much as I like it though, I don't think it's quite at the same level of quality as The Power of the Dog and Drive My Car. Out of all the films here, these are the 2 films you'll think about the most after watching them. They both have some outstanding scenes that just stick with you. What I like most about them is how they try to examine the complexity of human nature and how people navigate through feelings they don't know how to express, which to me is like a fundamental function of like filmmaking and like why films are so important. I love watching big and well-made films like Nightmare Alley and Dune, but I felt more emotionally connected and invested in these smaller scale films because they focus so much on the characters. With that said, I think The Power of the Dog will probably win because it's been showered with so much love and support from critics. It's been nominated for 11 awards, Drive My Car has only been nominated for 4. There's also only been 1 foreign language film to win Best Picture if you're not counting The Artist, which was a French silent film. So Drive My Car probably won't win, but in my opinion, I think it should win. I was just completely entranced by this film. I sat through all 3 hours of its runtime just completely mesmerized. I had to pee really bad like 2 hours in, but I just couldn't leave. I was like so invested that I didn't care if my kidneys started hurting. If I had to score both films, I'd probably give them a 4.5 out of 5. Part of me wonders if the reason why I like Drive My Car more has to do with the fact that I saw it in a theater. I saw The Power of the Dog at home, and I think there's a tendency when you watch things at home for it to kind of just not stick with you, because when you're in a theater, like you can't pause, you can't rewind, you're in it. So I think in a way that kind of makes it more special. Maybe if I watched Drive My Car at home and then watched The Power of the Dog, I might feel differently about both films, but as it stands right now, I do like Drive My Car more. I would not be mad if either film won. They're both excellent. Props to Ryusuke Hamaguchi and Jane Campion for making just fantastic films. And honestly, props to all the filmmakers, even the ones who made films that I didn't like because, you know, they put in the hard work and they got nominated for it. And honestly, like that's worth appreciating to some extent. So there you go. There's my breakdown of the 2022 Academy Awards. Let me know what you think will win and shouldn't win in the comment section below. Feel free to leave a recommendation on a film, TV show, or subject that I should discuss next while you're down there. Hit the like button if you like this video, or sign up for notifications, or subscribe, or do all 3, which is what I would personally recommend. I still plan on releasing a video about the sound treatment I did for both my office and the new studio here, so keep an eye out for that. Until then, I will see you guys in the next video. Take it easy and be well.